Well, Ali Moreno, 5 goals for Erling Haaland, all sorts of records, either close to, eclipsed, broken, whatever. He was unplayable at times in Manchester City's 7-0 win over RB Leipzig. One of his comments after the game, he said, look, Man City didn't bring me to this football club to win the Premier League. They brought me to this football club to win the Champions League. Looking at that, thinking of that comment, who can stop Manchester City on that form this season?
Well, I think the last part of your question there, on that form, I don't think anybody can. But finding that form hasn't been all that easy for Manchester City this season, certainly with any sort of consistency. And while we're not asking Erling Haaland to score 5 goals every game, I think what we're asking from Erling Haaland and Manchester City as a whole is to be more consistently goal dangerous. I think that has been an issue for Manchester City over the last couple of months, that inconsistency where they dominate the possession of the ball, but you don't really see a whole lot of chances coming out of it. That wasn't the case against Leipzig. Haaland was explosive, Manchester City were explosive, and what I liked about Erling Haaland against Leipzig is that he was always around the goal. And the balls that were somewhere in and around the 18-yard box, he was always close to getting onto a rebound. How did the ball end up finding Erling Haaland inside the 18-yard box? It's because you're there, because you've made the movement, it's because you've anticipated, because you've read the rebound, you've read the play. All those things only happen if indeed their balls play into the box, which Manchester City don't regularly do, and then Erling Haaland being active inside the 18-yard box. If those things happen with consistency, then you're going to find a much better version of Manchester City.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned on this form, because we've seen it before. Manchester City have looked unstoppable in the group stages. They've looked unstoppable in the knockout stages in the early rounds. But whether it's Real Madrid or other teams, they've found at least one team too good for them over the years. But this year, they are looking good. I thought Erling Haaland's post-game interview was very interesting because he said that on the Monday, the day before the game in training, Pep Guardiola said, the defending starts from the front. Work hard, run as fast as you can, close them down, because if that happens and you win the ball back, if it's Haaland or whoever wins the ball back, you're going to do so in an area of the field that's going to hurt them. Can that be done in every single game, knowing how tiring something like that and those tactics are?
Well, it can be done if it is done as a group. What you don't want is Erling Haaland running around, chasing people around, and then looking behind him, and the team is not coming with him. And at times, I think that Manchester City wants to do the pressing and counter-pressing higher up the field, but it doesn't feel like everybody is doing it at the same time. Now, when they're able to get this movement together defensively, and they're able to regain that possession, then that's when they become dangerous, because if you regain that possession of the ball higher up the field, it's not only the positions that you've taken as a team, but also the positions that the other team has taken. They're trying to play out of the back. They're expanding themselves. They're becoming a little bit more separated because they want to create space for themselves. If they lose the ball in a bad area, now those gaps are wider. They're bigger. And that's the gaps that Erling Haaland can run into, that loves to run into. Now, the point here is that once you win that ball, that you're willing to play that ball forward in between those gaps that you have just created and that I just mentioned. If you do that, again, this is a strength of Erling Haaland. Running in behind, find him in space, he's going to be dangerous. He certainly was so against Leipzig.
At times, Pep Guardiola can be quite prickly in after-match press conferences. After this one, he was very jovial. He was having a bit of fun. Julia Roberts got a mention. All sorts. Do you think that was because of the way that his team played? He didn't call them perfect middle to front because he said defensively that Leipzig probably should have had a goal or two the way that they defended. But do you think he liked what he saw? And that was maybe not the first time, but he thought, yeah, we're in a good place this year to win this Champions League for the first time.
If you're not jovial and happy after you win 7-0, then I don't know when you're going to be happy and jovial. As for Julia Roberts, I love me some Julia Roberts. Notting Hill, what a movie that is. I'll tell you this much about Pep Guardiola and his referencing Julia Roberts and being in a good mood. He didn't seem to be in the best mood ahead of the game. In fact, sort of being constructively critical of Kevin De Bruyne. He even mentioned a little bit of Erling Haaland ahead of this game in the press conference. And we've dissected that. We've talked about that. Then the game comes, and Kevin De Bruyne was excellent, and Erling Haaland scoring 5 goals. Then obviously, as a manager, you feel like, you know what? I did some managing this week. I poked some of my players. I twisted some of my players, and I found a reaction from those players on the game. And now we got a full performance, 7-0 win. Of course, I'm going to be happy.
Finally, RB Leipzig, 13 goals conceded in 2 trips to the Etihad. They didn't learn after the first time. They were too open. There is a glass ceiling for them right now, the way that they are, both in Bundesliga, where they've got more chance of winning, and in Champions League, where it's probably a quarter-final will be a great result for them. What can they learn that they didn't learn the last time from being thumped by Man City, apart from the fact that they would have done that to most teams yesterday?
Yeah, I think for Leipzig, you go back to the first leg and how over-respectful you were of Manchester City in a game in which Manchester City were admittedly conservative, and Pep Guardiola said as much, that he didn't want to go in a back and forth with Leipzig, that he didn't want to go in a back and forth with a German team, that Manchester City was not built for that. And there was a moment there in the second half of that first leg where Marco Rose and Leipzig took a step forward and said, you know what, we can press Manchester City, and we can force turnovers, and we can be a team that can be dangerous and can cause problems for them, and probably and potentially could have won the game. They didn't. And once you don't win that game and you have to come back to the Etihad and you have to get a result, it just wasn't going to happen. Leipzig just doesn't have the depth, doesn't have the strength, doesn't have the team to match up with Manchester City. And I suppose what you could say to Marco Rose is you could have been conservative as you were in the first half of that first leg of your home game, but you weren't. You chose to open up. You chose to play. I suppose that's your style. Maybe you say to Marco Rose there was a different approach to this game, perhaps, but it doesn't matter. The truth is that if Manchester City is playing at the level at which they played yesterday, Leipzig could have been at their very best, and it was still not going to be enough.
Well, the question is, going forward, who can stop Manchester City and who can stop Erling Haaland?
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week, subscribe to ESPN+.